wings like birds. So, of course, ultimately, the designs didn't really achieve what he wanted, but he worked very hard on that. And a brilliant man that he was, he again came up with some important elements of what was later taken on board. But really, somebody, I think, one of the important people in the history of flight was a guy called Abbas ibn Firmas, three-part name. He was a
Right.
Spaniard, and it was in the ninth century. Now, I won't go on about him too long, but he was what they called a polymath, someone who excels across a range of subjects. He was brilliant at astronomy and physics. He devised things to actually observe the universe, which in his time in the ninth century was quite unique. I mean, it was obviously a form of telescope, but they were very limited in what they could do. But he was an inventor, a scientist, and these initial designs enabled him to, for example, create a means, a contraption which showed the orbits of the planets around the sun. Now, for somebody in the ninth century to be doing something like that
Yeah.
was phenomenal. I mean, these people who like that were just brilliant minds. So that was something he did. He also made an excellent device, a lens which really corrected, certainly improved poor eyesight in people.
Wow.
So, and it really worked. So, what a human being to be able to say you've, saved or given much better eyesight to people at a time, the ninth century, where there were not the facilities there are today, for example, in dealing with eye problems. So he had all this, but perhaps, and interestingly as well, just to chip in there, he was also, as well as being a scientist, a great scientist, he was a very skilled musician and poet. Now that's really kind of unique because someone so gifted on the scientific side to be gifted artistically and creatively is very unusual. So
Mm.
anyway, this man had all that. But the thing he's most remembered for, Ibn Firmas, is his flying machine. Now, what he did, he invented this machine, a device which involved having two wings. Now, again, maybe he was following the birds, but the
Hmm.
wings were made of silk and wood and feathers, believe it or not, because he obviously
Wow.
felt feathers were an integral part of how to
Of-
fly.
Right.
Anyhow, on the great day, he strapped this device to himself, and I suppose as a sign of his confidence in his machine, he proceeded to jump off a cliff in Cordoba in southern Spain, which is where he lived.
Mm.
Now, he is credited with being the first human to actually fly, because he did fly apparently for, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds. There was genuine flight, but he did eventually crash to the floor and quite severely injured, though he did recover eventually from that. But what he discovered, what he learned, really was paving the way for the first powered flights, which was any idea. Any idea, Cuz, when the records show humans first took to the air in a powered sort of aeroplane? Any idea? How long ago?
Uh, it'd be a good guess. This one,
Yeah.
1821.
No, you're only about 82 years out.
All
It,
right.
it was
Yeah.
an unfair question to throw at you, but
Right.
yeah, it was in 1903.
All
Wilbur
right.
and Orville Wrights, the Wright brothers, well known and called that. They actually flew in their contraption. It was like an aeroplane, like a box kite, really, but it was the first powered heavier than air flight ever recorded for human beings. But obviously, they had learned lots of things. But it was the first powered heavier than air flight ever recorded for human beings. But obviously, they had learned lots of things from all of this stuff over the years of people trying to flap wings, and even in even in Victorian times, we have old, very early video film. It wasn't video, of course, then, of people with birds' feathers strapped to their arms, jumping off of piers in the country and then crashing straight into the sea. So people still had this idea that if we could flap our wings, we would fly. But of course, without thrust, it wouldn't work. So anyway, that the Wright brothers really had the first powered flights, which was a major step forward in aeroplanes. For the first time, human beings could fly. Now, of course, there was a long way to go. At 1903, and of course, in 1914, the First World War came along, which did contain aeroplanes. You may have seen an old film of that. Obviously, not sophisticated aeroplanes like they became, but the First World War had that effect of accelerating the technical and the technology of flight. So things improved very rapidly, only to be given a further boost. It had to be something positive coming out of the two world wars. But in World War II, again, the technology was improved and increased tremendously, so that the whole concept of flying had gone up a huge amount because of the two world wars. So there we are. And that led then to the first human supersonic flights, the first time a human broke the supersonic sound barrier, Mach 1, which was in 1947, very soon after the end of the war, which showed again the progress that the war had caused. And it was an American Air Force man called Charles Yeager, who went through the sound barrier in his military plane for the first time. And that was a massive achievement, because it was felt to break the sound barrier could actually just destroy the aeroplane and its occupants. So that was the first breaking of the sound barrier. And of course, that moved on in a way to commercial flights, starting in the late 50s, the design for Concorde, which finally flew commercially or flew supersonically in 1969. So if you think of that, from 1903, when the Wright brothers first just got off the ground, I don't think I said before, they got off the ground for 12 seconds. And their flight, recorded as the first human-powered flight, manned flight, was less than the length of a jumbo jet, a 747 or an A380. It was actually less, but it was still flight. So the seeds...